to us for a little bit. Scott.
Thank you, Mayor Bubenik, Council President Grimes, City Councilors, Ms. Lombos. Thank you for allowing me time to share my thoughts this evening. I appreciate the service that each of you give for the City of Tualatin. I was grateful last week to see that our Chief of Police signed the joint statement from metro area law enforcement partners condemning the tactics demonstrated by the Minneapolis Police Department in the recent murder of George Floyd. I'm also glad to say that in my 20 years living in Tualatin, I don't recall hearing of an instance of racial bias or abusive use of force by our police. That said, I was shocked and appalled by the recent demonstration of blatant racial bias and abuse of power by members of the Westland Police Force, our neighboring community. I feel strongly that we should be proactive in ensuring no such actions ever occur in Tualatin. To that end, I have 3 recommendations for your consideration relative to our Tualatin Police Force. Number 1, that some form of citizen review be made of our police department's current rules around use of force. I understand that police officers risk their lives every day in our service, but that does not give them license to kill anytime they sense a threat to themselves or others. The use of force should be the last choice in a series of potential responses to a problem. Yet anyone paying any attention to the news of recent years can cite examples of unarmed civilians being killed by police. Excessive use of force by police is a problem that must be addressed. Citizens should be involved in determining what is appropriate use of force in our community. Number 2, that citizens likewise be involved in reviewing the terms regarding discipline of officers included in any police union agreement. I don't blame the police unions for trying to get the best possible terms for their members, but in far too many cases, these terms have allowed officers with obvious misconduct to maintain their jobs, be reinstated after being fired, or maintain their pay under even the most egregious of circumstances. The city should stand up for its citizens as much as for its police force. Do not sign an agreement with the union that does not have a balanced approach to officer discipline. Officer misconduct must be addressed. And to the police officers and union leaders who may be listening, please stand up and help make your profession one every citizen can be proud of. That 3 officers stood idly by in Minneapolis while one of their own murdered an unarmed civilian is a discredit to the profession. Number 3, that procedures be implemented for a citizen review of any instance in which an officer is involved in the death of any person. Internal police reviews are necessary and good, but in the extreme circumstance in which a citizen has died, fellow citizens deserve full access to the facts to understand why, and to assess for themselves if the officer involved acted appropriately, whether or not discipline is given. You will note that all 3 of my recommendations include citizen review. The time has come for greater citizen involvement in how police protect and serve their communities. Only with such citizen involvement will racial bias and abuse of force be rooted out. And only with citizen involvement will the police again have the respect of the entire community, no matter their color of skin. Ideally, a large share of citizens involved should be persons of color, who for whatever reason are impacted disproportionately by interactions with police. To be clear, these recommendations are not intended to convey an assumption of misconduct by any member of our police department, but the travesties of justice so apparent in Minneapolis and Westland and other communities in the United States make clear that action is needed. We cannot leave such action to the federal or even state government. Real change will be made city by city, police force by police force. Let Tualatin help lead the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Is there anyone else who would like to provide public comment? Anyone at the poll center?
There is no one at the poll center.
All right, then we'll move on to our consent agenda. Our consent agenda tonight, those items that are considered routine and will be adopted by one motion unless someone on council would like one of them removed and heard separately later tonight. Tonight, the consent agenda consists of item number 1, consideration for approval of the work session and regular meeting minutes of May 26, 2020. Consideration of approval of change in liquor license application for Buffalo Wild Wings. Item 3, consideration of approval of a liquor license application for Red Robin Gourmet Burgers and Brews. Item number 4, consideration of resolution number 5497-20, an amendment to the intergovernmental agreement between Washington County and the City of Tualatin for the Washington County Community Development Block Grant Program. And finally, item 5, consideration of resolution number 5498-20, resolution authorizing solid waste and recycling rate adjustments for 2020. Does anyone here on city council would like to have something removed from consent? All right. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda as read?
Motion to approve consent agenda as read.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as read. I'll start off. Remember, we got to do this by roll call pretty much.
Hold on, Frank, I have a comment I want to make on the two items, if it's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I didn't want to pull both items because as I discussed with the city staff, it's obviously we're all in favor of everything that's on this agenda, but I just wanted to point out, number one, that I felt we should have kind of had a little, hey, look at what we're doing with regard to our housing. That's the one consent item, the IGA, and what our city staff has done to kind of make this a unanimous, kind of a no-brainer type event is because of all the hard work they've put in setting us up for affordable and low-income housing. And so I want to give a shout out to them. And the second thing is we had a work session with Republic Services, but we really didn't have, at least I didn't have an opportunity and it wasn't at the time, to thank Republic for the tremendous job that they're doing. They noted their customer service record. I think one of the other councilors had made a comment that they did have good customer service, and I can tell you no complaints from anybody, but a lot of compliments on what they do and the effort that they put out to work with the city on behalf as really partners with the city. And it's unfortunate that we have them on the consent agenda because of all the good things that they've been doing, and we too often move on and don't take the time to acknowledge some of the good things that everyone's doing to make this job so much easier. That's all.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion, a second, and that was approved. So I'll start off with Valerie.
Aye. Oh,
Robert.
thought I was muted.
Aye.
Bridget.
Aye.
Maria.
Yes.
Paul. You're muted, Paul.
I know my space bar is not working. Sorry. Yes.
All right. Council President Nancy. You're muted too, Nancy.
Aye.
All right. And I vote aye, so it's unanimous. All right. Moving on to special reports. Item number 1, presentation of the 2019 Tualatin Planning Commission Annual Report, which I believe will be led by Alan and Steve.
Sure. Yes, that's correct. So Alan Alplin, Planning Commissioner, is here to present the 2019 Tualatin Planning Commission report. I should just note before Alan gets into his presentation that Alan was awarded Outstanding Lifetime Volunteer for 2019. And so I'm really pleased that he was able to join us tonight.
Congratulations, Alan. Well deserved.
Thank you very much. In fact, I'm filling in for 2 people who couldn't be here tonight. So that's a measure of my dedication here. But so for 2019, fulfilling the goal 1 for citizen involvement, we provided advice on the 2040 housing needs and economic opportunity analysis. We provided recommendations to the council for the Basalt Creek Comprehensive Plan update, a consideration to rezone some property the city owns off of Herman Road, amendments to the Tualatin Development Code, Development Code, and amendments to the community plan for the Tualatin Sewer Master Plan. We had actually 3 quasi-judicial decisions, variances, conditional uses. One was for a piece of property that Mutual Materials was trying to use behind Lakeside Lumber, and then 2 that related to the PGE site that they have right off of Tualatin Sherwood. One was for a variance for a wireless communications deal. Actually, that was actually not there. The second one was a conditional use for a wireless communication facility at the PGE plan. And so that was the summary. We did miss a few meetings, unfortunately, but everyone was supportive and assisting, trying to help the council. So that is all I have, unless you have.
All right. Well, thank you. I just want to say I very much appreciate everyone on the Planning Commission. That committee can get pretty intense sometimes because you get into the weeds just as much as we do. And I very much appreciate some of the things that you guys take off our plate because we're busy. I know you guys are busy, ladies and gentlemen on the committee. And what I've heard and what I've seen and reading your minutes and your recommendations, you guys ask terrific questions. You get into it, and I very much appreciate the time. Anyone else on council like to say anything about the Planning Commission?
I'd like to say something if that's all right.
Sure.
Thank you. The Planning Commission is one of my committee assignments. And so I was very new coming into it this past 6, 7 months, 8 months. But I was so impressed from my very first meeting with the level of professionalism and the level of competency and the experience that the members of the Planning Commission have, excuse me, and just the absolute expertise in their areas and what they individually bring to the committee with their background and their knowledge of the community. I was absolutely knocked over. I was so impressed. I would stack our Planning Commission up against any city in the state. I was absolutely marveled at it. And the thoughtful, deep way that they look at these projects and they look at the things that it's being brought to the city. I just completely confident in their ability to make wonderful decisions and very, very thoughtful and lasting decisions for our community. And I just, of all the committees that I've sat on over time, we have a lot of fantastic volunteers, but I was literally gobsmacked by the amount of experience and professionalism of the people that comprise that committee. So I just wanted to give them some praise because it's very well founded. So.
If this was a paying job, I'd ask for a raise.
Yes.
Therefore, we will double your salary, Alan.
Yes. And I would
very much.
give you thumbs up.
Anyone else? All right. Thanks very much, Alan.
You bet.
Moving on to public hearings. Item number 1, consideration of resolution number 5496-20, declaring the city election to receive state revenue sharing funds during fiscal year 2020-21. And that, I believe, is Don.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council. It's my pleasure tonight to ask you to approve the attached resolution declaring the city's election to receive state shared revenue funds during fiscal year 2021. These are governed under Oregon Revised Statutes 221.770 and is a portion of the state liquor taxes. In order for the state to receive shared revenues, the city must have levied property taxes in the prior year, passed a resolution approving participation in the program, and hold 2 public hearings. The first on the possible use of funds in front of the Budget Committee, and that was held on May 20th, and tonight's public hearing in front of the City Council on the proposed use of funds. We are estimated to receive $413,890 in the upcoming fiscal year. This revenue is not restricted and it is used for general city operations. The remaining portion of our liquor taxes, our cigarette tax, the marijuana tax, gas tax are all levied under a separate ORS and is not part of the public hearing this evening. At that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions for Don? Any motions? Everyone's so quiet tonight.
I motion, and I hope I'm saying this right, that we adopt resolution number 5496-20.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 5496-20, declaring the city's election to receive state revenue sharing funds during fiscal year 2020-2021. Valerie,
Aye.
Robert,
Aye.
Bridget,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Maria,
Yes.
Council President Nancy.
Aye.
And I vote aye also, unanimous. Thank you. Thanks, Don.
And thank you.
All right. So item number 2 on the public hearings is consideration of updates to mixed-use commercial provisions of the Tualatin Development Code to apply a mixed-use commercial zone in the area subject to the existing provisions of the mixed-use commercial overlay zone, Chapter 57 of the Development Code. I have a little script that I have to read because this is a legislative item. So this is a legislative land use hearing for the City Council to consider Plan Text Amendment PTA 20-0001 and Plan Map Amendment PMA 20-0001, which would create a new land use zone called the Mixed Use Commercial Zone, and also delete the existing Mixed Use Commercial Overlay Zone from the Tualatin Development Code. The criteria for granting the PTA and PMA are the applicable statewide planning goals, Divisions 9 and 12 of the Oregon Administrative Rules, Tualatin Development Code Section 33.070 Plan Amendments, and the applicable goals and policies from the City of Tualatin Comprehensive Plan. The hearing will be conducted as follows. First, city staff will make a presentation. Next, the council will hear from members of the public who wish to testify in favor of the proposal, followed by members of the public who wish to testify against the proposal, followed by anyone else who wishes to testify about the proposal. Upon conclusion of public testimony, individual councilors may ask questions of city staff or any person who provided testimony. After council questions, the council will close the public portion of the hearing and enter into deliberations. Upon conclusion of deliberations, the council will consider an appropriate motion and vote. Does any member of the council wish to abstain from participation in this hearing?
No.
Right. I see nobody's hands up, so I guess that's all no. The city council will now begin the public hearing with a presentation from city staff. I
Thank
believe
you,
that is
Mayor.
Erin. All right, Erin. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. My name is Erin Engman. I'm the Associate Planner with the City of Tualatin, and tonight I'll be presenting the Plan Text and Plan Map Amendment 20-0001 regarding the establishment of the mixed-use commercial zone. And I'm happy to share my screen for the presentation, or is there a preference to follow along with me?
I don't mind either way. I mean,
Yeah.
I would share, go ahead and share the screen.
go ahead and share their screen so people can see it.
Okay. It looks like I may be disabled from sharing my screen by the host. Apologies for.
You should be able to now.
Okay. Great. And I'm not sure if you're able to see what is on my screen.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Let me try this one more time.
Oh, I love this. I wish we had this.
Oh,
There.
here we go. Starting. There we go.
All right. So tonight's discussion will cover some of the history and background of what has led us here today, as well as the proposed text and map amendments, the implementation process that staff has fulfilled, and then we will close with a recommendation from our planning commissioner, Alan Applin, and a question and answer section. So an overview of tonight's discussion, I believe it was Last winter, council directed staff to determine the feasibility of increasing the maximum height in the mixed-use commercial overlay district. And as part of this request, council wanted to ensure that the transportation system could support these impacts and that parking requirements would still apply to this larger development. And you also were interested in considering how building heights might be increased in other areas of Tualatin. Tonight's discussion focuses in the Bridgeport area where the mixed-use commercial overlay district has been applied. As part of the proposed amendment, staff would like to create a new zoning district that would be applied where the mixed-use commercial overlay district was applied and where the future eligibility of application would be applied. So as part of our amendments, the application, staff kind of took some feedback from our development community and the public regarding the current application of the mixed-use commercial overlay district and how it was confusing, mainly because the boundaries of this overlay district are not listed on our zoning map 9.1. Instead, they're somewhat buried in our code as a figure. So creating a standalone district that is shown on map 9.1 would help eliminate some of this confusion, and it would also provide greater clarity and certainty for our developers and public. Staff engaged a transportation engineer and engaged them about how increasing building height might impact our existing transportation system. And in doing this exercise, we found that this particular mixed use district where the MUCOD is currently applied could support a 70-foot district-wide building height increase. And then a 100-foot increase limited to this geographic area that we're looking at right now and limited to uses too. So the limited uses would include commercial lodging such as hotels and mixed use development with a residential component. And the properties we're looking at right now include the Grand Hotel, the former Pig and Pancake site, and then the site where Boom Fitness currently is located, as well as the Xfinity store. So as part of the proposed text amendments, we touched various chapters just to ensure that the creation of this new zone is brought into compliance with our comprehensive plan, as well as other development code chapters that reference the mixed-use commercial overlay district. So we did touch chapter 5 and chapter 6 of the comprehensive plan. And chapter 31, 38, and 54 were just slight tweaks to acknowledge this new zone and to move definitions from the existing MUCOD chapter to the appropriate chapter 31, where the rest of the development code definitions are located. So we spent a lot of effort working on chapter 57 to establish the new district. And as part of that, we rewrote a purpose statement, which is to provide areas suitable for a mix of office, retail, and high density housing. Retail uses should be located on the ground floor to encourage an active streetscape. Buildings should be oriented towards the street with clearly marked entrances. The use of alternative modes of transportation such as transit, pedestrian, and bicycle activity are to be promoted within the district. And we also reformatted this chapter to look like our other zoning code chapters. So as part of the proposed text amendments, I believe they were included in attachment B. You will find that we have tables that show the various permitted uses, housing types, and development standards. Some of the language was revised slightly for readability, but as far as the spirit and intent of our development standards, they're largely the same as the MUCOD district. With the exception being the maximum structure height that was increased to 70 feet district-wide, and then 100 feet to the eligible district that we already reviewed to the limited uses, including commercial lodging and mixed-use residential development. And then chapters 73 include design standards. They're just relocated to the appropriate chapter to coalesce with the development code improvement update that we recently did this past year. And then now we'll look at the proposed map amendments. So on the left side, you see the existing map amendment where the land has historically been zoned general commercial with MUCOD overlay. And we're asking for it to be rezoned to this mixed use commercial district. And you will find attachment D has an analysis and findings that provides staff findings to the applicable criteria of the Oregon statewide planning goals, the Oregon administrative rules, Metro Code, the Tualatin Comprehensive Plan, as well as the Tualatin Development Code. And I touched briefly on it, but the transportation planning rule, we did engage a transportation engineer to review these changes that we're proposing, just to ensure that these changes won't have a drastic scale on our existing transportation infrastructure. And I believe through just the promotion of mixed use development and having patrons living on site, working on site, and engaging with these retailers, that the amendments would not add more than 20 trips to an individual movement during the peak PM hour. So generally speaking, we don't see any significant impacts to our transportation system through these proposed amendments. And as part of our legislative actions, staff has sent a pre-adoption notice to the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development. We sent 56 notices to affected property owners regarding the base zoning. A notice of hearing was sent to partner agencies and CIOs, and the notice was also posted in our newspaper publications and posted into public locations as required by our code. And now I'll turn it over to Alan.
Well, Aaron gave us a similar presentation at our meeting last month, and I think everyone was in agreement that this was an improvement in terms of clarity for the use of this property. It was also agreed and discussed that based on the upcoming development from a transportation side, if a station, a max station goes there, that this is a nice amenity for commercial and residential development that surrounds that transportation hub. We did ask questions about the sufficiency of the existing transportation system, and as Aaron just said, they believe that it can handle this kind of development, and there was no resistance to, I mean, obviously people were talking about 70 feet, but even going higher than that. And I remember that when this was brought up a year ago, that one of the other areas that was under consideration, or at least I thought should be, is sort of some of the areas around the lake. So I don't know where you folks think it should go next, but we were all in agreement. We voted and it was unanimous to approve this recommendation for you to update this zoning issue. That's all I have.
Thank you, Alan. So with that, staff and the Planning Commission recommend that City Council approve the proposed amendments PTA 20-0001 and PMA 20-0001. We do have some bullet points that show alternatives that could be considered. And I believe my next slide is probably just my questions slide. So with that, I'll turn it over to Council and ask if you have any questions for us.
All right, we'll get to questions in a moment. So I'd like to take this moment now to hear from any members from the public who wish to testify in favor of the proposal. Is there anyone in the poll center or on Zoom that would like to do that?
There is no one at the poll center.
All right. Well, that answers my question. Well, semi answers my question. Those who would like to provide testimony against this proposal? Knowing that there's no one in the poll center, I'm not seeing anybody here in the Zoom chat here. All right. So we have no feedback from the public, either positive or negative. So we'll move on to counselors asking questions of staff and or Alan. Questions? Valerie.
Oh, I just wondered, when you put this out for public comment, if you received any public comment and what it was.
We didn't receive any public comment. Prior to us sending out the Measure 56 notices, we did engage the property owners that are located in that identified area that's eligible for the 100-foot increase. Essentially, they're the properties that they're currently are outside of the MUCOD district, but would be brought into this new mixed-use commercial district. And our conversations with them were positive. We didn't hear concerns from those property owners. And I think they're excited for these new opportunities.
Other questions? Paul.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Aaron, and Alan. Thank you for the work that the Planning Commission has done. I have not so much a question, but a comment. Alan had mentioned residential, and I agree with him that area is probably a prime opportunity for some type of low income in particular, which I know has been a priority of the state in terms of helping to fund rail projects, such as we're trying to fund with the Southwest Corridor. But I don't quite understand how that zoning would allow for residential unless I'm missing something. My understanding is its primary, the primary motivation for this change was to allow a hotel with some interest from a hotel to be built there. So where specifically, Aaron, would the residential, what's the opportunity and where would that possibility be for residential?
So the chapter amendments proposed do include a multifamily residential component as a permitted use. I believe the proposed density is between 25 to 50 units, which is one of the higher densities that we have within the city of Tualatin. But as far as what sort of development would be placed where is probably going to be led by property owners and developers. At this time, we don't have code language to encourage low-income housing.
Well, so where would that, I mean, I guess I'm confused then about the zoning. So I'm looking at the proposed versus the existing, and it shows MUC and CG, and then ML, which I believe is where the hotel was planned. And then off to the corner where there's already existing buildings of ML and MG. What is that then allow for residential just by the virtue of that? And the second comment I'll just make is make sure I understand the new state law last year is a developer, as long as something is zoned for residential, it is allowed to have that significantly higher density. Is that correct?
Let me start by answering your first question, and thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
So the areas proposed for MUC would allow multifamily housing as a permitted use outright, and it would be at the density of 25 to 50 units an acre.
Okay, which is what would be necessary, I believe, to bring in the type of housing that we, or at least, anyway, okay, thank you, that clarifies it, and thanks for clarifying.
Okay, great, thank you.
Other questions? All right. So I'll go ahead and conclude our deliberations. I'm sorry, conclude the question and answer part of our.
Pardon, Mayor, just a point of order. I think that Councilor Brooks may have had a question.
I didn't see that. All right.
Thanks, Steve. My question was more about transportation planning in the area. I I am liking the idea of walkability, mixed use, living together, all the things that we're aiming to do with this. And I know that the rail, I mean, that hasn't been passed yet. So if it doesn't move forward for whatever reason, and I hope it does, what do we do, or how is traffic density, which is already kind of an issue over there, mitigated and managed?
That's a great question. With our transportation analysis that we conducted through the TPR findings, they were applied to our existing situation. So the increased building heights and potential density that might follow these text amendments and map amendments did not necessarily include flexibility from the proposed transit station that may terminate at the Bridgeport area. So we strictly just looked at the existing transportation system. That being said, if TriMet does make its way out to us at the Bridgeport terminus, it would probably likely improve the area. And we could maybe potentially look at revising our development code standards to support more density if council desired.
Thank you.
I'm gonna take a good stare at the screen here. Anyone else? Going box by box here. Not seeing any hands. All right. So with that, I'll go ahead and close the public portion of this hearing, and council can enter into deliberations. Any discussion? Nancy.
Well, I have a question pursuant to what Councilor Morrison mentioned. I haven't heard of a hotel making application for that area over there. Is that rumor, or is that based in fact, or?
I'll throw it over to Steve and Aaron.
We have been speaking to the park property developers, and they have mentioned that they're interested in considering a hotel development in that area where the former Pig and Pancake site is. But at this time, we haven't received a formal pre-application meeting or any action from them to initiate the land use review period. But I believe it's something that the property owner is considering.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have one more.
Go ahead.
Also something that the committee, Alan, had mentioned that we had discussed in council as well, around the increased density around the area around the commons. And I'm just curious if it's not on here because we're still looking towards that, or are we staging it, or I'm just curious where the continuity of that conversation went.
I can take this one, Aaron, if that's okay. So I think that the answer is that it would require a significant amount of work in order to change the zoning around the lake and around downtown. We're certainly tracking with changes that are being made at the state level to reconsider certain kinds of transportation analysis zones. And so particularly that's something that we at the staff level have held out to the state and to our regional partners as an area that is of interest for us. I think longer term, you know, on the heels of the Tualatin 2040 housing work, I think that a downtown plan and planning effort is something that the council could consider, and I would see that being a part of it.
Thank you very much.
Robert.
Yeah, just wanted to speak to that point briefly. But first, the plan text amendment that's in front of us, I think, does an excellent job of unlocking some value in an area that is ready for development and hopefully will be served by mass public transportation in the future. I like the concept of mixed use, of course, and I could see this being applied downtown, particularly at where the Hagen site is now, as an opportunity to bring some residential, but that's not in front of us today. I did want to take that invitation from Mr. Applin to talk about building heights downtown, and I think that is something that we will discuss in the near future, because again, it also helps to unlock some value and bring in some development. So I want to express my support for this amendment, and then finally ask a question, presumably of Sean, because we're working with two different things here, plan text amendment and a plan map amendment. Are those two separate motions?
They are not. So even though they're two separate amendments, you can consider them under one motion.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for staff? All right.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve Plan Text Amendment 20-0001 and Plan Map Amendment 20-0001.
All right.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve Plan Text Amendment PTA 20-0001 and Plan Map Amendment PMA 20-001. Any questions or discussions on the motions? All right, I'll start off with Valerie.
Aye.
Robert.
Aye.
Bridget.
Aye.
Picture shifted around. Maria.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Council President Nancy.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. So the PTA and the PMA are approved. All right.
So just a point of clarification, Mayor. So because of that, so the city staff will bring back an ordinance at the next meeting for final adoption of an actual ordinance that implements those amendments.
Terrific. Thank you. All right. So let me scroll back here. All right. So that brings us to council communications. We did not have a work session this evening. So we'll start off with Valerie.
I just have one thing. I just or one topic. I wanted to commend Chief Steele for helping the organization of the peaceful protest last Tuesday, and helping make sure that went off with, in the way it should have, in a wonderful way. The other thing, I know there's been a lot of talk about, I know we have work, and probably there's room for more transparency, but there's been a lot of talk about the police unions, and I just wanted to mention that our contract, I just want to read it here. It says, disciplinary action may include termination, demotion, reduction of pay, suspension without pay, or written reprimand. So we do have some tools in place in our union contract currently. I'm sure this will be looked at in more depth, but I just really want to commend Police Chief Steele for letting a protest happen the way, or helping to make that happen the way it should.
And I'd just like to point out, if you don't mind, Mayor, the police contract is available on our website. If you go to the police department, and well, you could just search police contract, and it is available. We're transparent with our contracts. Both of our contracts, our AFSCME contract and our police union contract. And Councilor Pratt had asked about that last week, and I had pointed that out. So thank you.
All right. Robert, you're up.
Yeah, I'll begin with echoing Councilor Pratt's kudos to our police chief, and extend that also to our city manager and her staff. This was a sort of a quick event that came to the forefront, and we organized quickly and did everything that we should have to ensure the safety of the protesters. And I also want to reach out and thank the organizers as well as everybody who marched. I thought it was a great example of civil discourse that was done respectfully, and it never got out of control. And everybody that walked away from there, did so feeling better about themselves and hopefully doing something to start to heal the deep wounds that are out there on this subject. So thank you all.
Bridget.
I have quite a few council communications this evening. First, I also want to agree with everyone else. I think that, our nation, our world has witnessed, and everyone can feel inside themselves a moment when they have felt and faced injustice, and to have such a disturbing display in front of our eyes is something that to have a vigil and a coming together in our community makes a lot of sense. So I just want to honor especially our communities of color and a lot of things that people have been facing for a long time, and especially the Black community. I want to, on the heels of that, and then also to thank Chief Steele. It was a bright spot, and Markayla Ballard for organizing. I remember her when she was still in high school and did Hands Around the Commons and was such a profoundly moving speaker and inspiring to me personally. It's interesting to look up as a middle-aged lady to a 17-year-old girl and look up to her amazing articulateness and ability to, and now she's moving forward and doing more in our community. So I'm super grateful, and just shows how much different voices and diverse voices contribute to our community. So she's a great example of that. And our chief also did a wonderful job with leadership. I somehow thought we were going to be talking about police policy. I guess I was confused that it was this meeting. But I do want to acknowledge the people and the fact that I did watch President Obama's conference and the 8 Can't Wait. And just on an early overview and discussion with our police department, that we are pretty much, from what I can tell, in line with those 8. So I just want to be reassuring around our de-escalation policies and know that there's an intention in our community around that, in our leadership. And I just want to acknowledge Sherilyn, Mayor Bubenik, and Chief Steele for the leadership and coming out for the peaceful vigil. I also want to acknowledge the victims. There's the Wear Orange campaign. Last year we did a proclamation. The leadership this year, we spoke, and there were some things they wanted to update in the proclamations that due to COVID did not happen. But I do want to say that I support the Wear Orange campaign. I appreciate the Moms Demand Action group that meets here in the Tualatin Library and their efforts to reduce gun violence in our communities, and how gun violence also disproportionately affects people of color, and to acknowledge Counselor Reyes's experience and victimhood around gun violence. So just raising awareness around that and thanking everybody that supported last weekend's efforts in the Wear Orange campaign. It just seems like a timely moment for awareness on that. Thirdly, I want to say that I did participate with the PAB board in doing reviews for the EOP program, which is an economic opportunity program that got some increased funding from the CARES Act. So we reviewed different amazing organizations that help people for work, and there will be a public hearing. So we'll have the next PAB meeting on the 11th, and we'll be discussing the outcomes of those contracts, who for the request for proposals and how where that is. We also had the Water Consortium met after a long time of not meeting. So I want to let you guys know that there were some budget changes due to cuts in Portland, and that were approved. There were also updates to the website, and there was a focus on emergency preparedness and water safety. And the message is really that our water is safe to drink, and people should know that. They've been doing translating, and that's all available to like hundreds of languages. And the website is also Spanish or English, and should be easier to navigate. So if you have an opportunity, check it out. And then I also wanted to discuss adding, and I had sent an email, I want to discuss adding our, let me grab my placemat, our climate action plan, and the opportunity of, I had talked about this during the budget meeting, that we had discussed a climate action plan. And when I asked about the funding of it, there was a response to pull it out of reserves. And to me, that didn't feel right, because it's something that we had talked about at our advance, and something that I think that we had plans for. So I didn't want it to be like something that, well, we have the money for it, but it's tucked away. And for the public to think that this was sort of a last minute kind of a idea, and not something that we had talked about since way back in December. So so I wanted to make a line item change on the budget to be like a placeholder for an estimated amount that a consultant would cost. So there's a range, and the number that I had talked with, I don't know if this is how you do this, but the number was like 100 was an estimate of $100,000. And I also want to say that I reached out to counselor in Hillsborough to talk about their experience with climate action plan, and just wanted to reiterate that utilizing a perspective of conservation, I think could help us make better decisions. So there are 3 examples of cost saving decisions and environmental saving decisions. One of the things that comes to my mind first of all, which we have in our agenda and which we know as a city, is that the cost of water is going to be increasing. So to do things that are more water saving could save us money, in planning for that. And it doesn't matter which source we stick with or go to, those costs are anticipated to rise. So that's one place. The second thing was, and I know that it might be apples and oranges, but the estimated cost for Hillsborough to leave and go on their own after having PG own their lights and switch over to more efficient lighting is going to save them $500,000 estimated. So having that perspective with decision making, I think could be really helpful to at least me as a counselor in making decisions. And then the third one that I thought was really interesting was a laminated lumber program, and which is reduces the cost of, or reduces the impact of concrete buildings off gas or creating more heat. So they are building the first, and I think would help our lumber industry. And so they're building the first public building there out of that material. And I think if we looked at things through that kind of a lens, we might think of things like that or consider things like that when we are doing public buildings like we're doing right now. So those were 3 examples that I just wanted to bring up and ask for your consideration to add it onto the agenda for our next meeting. I think that's it. Oh, and the last thing is the stormwater mural is complete by the library, and it's on Martinazzi, just north of the bus stop. So take a look at that. And I'm very proud of the Arts Committee and grateful to the contribution of the artists on completing our second storm drain mural. Thank you, everybody.
So circling back to your request about the climate action plan and funding for it. So what's your request? Because
To add a line,
we have to make a request and get 4 votes to move it forward, to have Don and Sherilyn mark that in the budget as per your request.
my request would be to add a line item for $100,000 for a climate action plan. That number would be obviously negotiable as we explored more of what it is, but it's just so that it's not coming out of reserves and as a placeholder.
Okay. Do any counselors have questions for Councilor Brooks about that request? Valerie.
So I'm assuming this would come out of the general fund, but, and I hope Don's still here, but what would get moved then to put that in place? We have.
See if Don's still paying attention. There he is.
Oh, he's still in the sunshine. Yay.
How'd you do that, Don?
I'm still awake. What we would do is move it out of the contingency line that is there now. We would put it in there and it would be reduced to contingencies and reserves. So whether we do that now or do that at any time, we come out of the contingencies.
Right.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure how the process works, but we did talk about this quite a bit at the council advance, so I would be in favor of moving forward with this.
All right. Other counselors? Paul.
Yeah, climate action plan has long been something I've advocated for the city. As some of us are aware, Milwaukee did a very extensive climate action plan 2 years ago. Lake Oswego did one. However, my preference would be to leave the money in contingency, and I'll tell you why. Clackamas County has reached out to all cities, including Tualatin, to work on a climate action plan. It's a priority of the county, and they are working on funding. Metro has stated it's a priority for cities within the metro region to have a climate action plan. And subject to the problems associated with COVID-19, they are anticipating creating some type of funding mechanism. And it looks like probably through the state. The state has made it a priority for cities to have a climate action plan. And in fact, I think most of us believe if the Republicans had not walked out of the short session, the climate plan that had actually cleared committee, that actually was one of the few times that the state has mandated something and created a funding source for that item, and that specifically was a climate action plan. There's a lot of us kind of looking at the tea leaves, and certainly myself in private conversations with a lot of the different state legislatures believe that in the long session that will pass and that funding will be there. And that I think would be my preference to the way we proceed with it, because I don't think it's a problem with public perception. We've made it clear, very clear, that the city wants to work on and to begin a climate action plan. And it is clearly a funding problem, but we are, of course, a small city. And I'd like to just see us be a little bit more patient, and then we can hopefully get going with that next year.
Others? Robert? And
Just
then,
from an administrative standpoint, Sherilyn, is this something there's room for in the work plan that staff has put forward for the next year?
Thank you, Counselor. So yes, it is on our work plan to, in terms of bringing forward a discussion for scoping at a council meeting or a work session in the fall, September, October. So we would plan to come forward, have an open discussion about scope, and then move forward based on that scope. So there's a wide variety. Various cities have done it various ways. Lake Oswego spent about $10,000. Milwaukee spent about $250,000. There's different programs in different places. Clackamas County, as Councilor Morrison mentioned, is doing some things that include Tualatin. The reason it was not included, well, we didn't include it in the budget, not because we didn't think it was a priority, and that's a lot of negatives, but not because we didn't think it was a priority, but because we didn't know what this entire scope would be. So it is on our work plan to come forward and have a conversation about scope, and then move forward. It will require a consultant because we don't have capacity internally, but except to probably manage a consultant.
All right, well, with that structure, I think I would encourage us to hold off on this for two reasons. One, we don't know what the scope is yet. And two, it's no secret that we are in uncertain economic times. And when this topic comes up in September or October on the work plan, we'll have a much better understanding at that point in time of what money we have available, if there's other things we ought to be saving for. And Councilor Brooks, I want to make clear, I'm in 100% agreement with the need for this. It's just in terms of the logistics of pulling out $100,000 and funding it now instead of waiting until the issue is a little bit more ripe and a better understanding of scope and cost.
okay. Any other comments?
Can I respond to that?
Sure, go ahead.
Um,
Well, actually, you respond, and then it's Nancy, and then goes to Marie.
okay. Okay, I just want to say that part of the reason that I think that it's important to put a place, when I understand other pieces on our budget that were not quite understood as far as scope, there's a way of putting a placeholder and a line item there. It doesn't mean that we have to spend that particularly exact amount of money, but it does mean that that we're willing to say that we're not just pulling this out of reserves during a time, especially a time like this of COVID, that it's something that we've planned for and that's not a surprise. And to Paul's point, also, I would like to say that I think that some money that will come from the state will come if we're prepared to receive it by having a climate action plan. And if we're not prepared, we're going to lose out on money. So those are two big concerns that I have around that. Not to, but I just for your consideration. Thanks.
Nancy.
Thanks. My question was about the amount of money, the $100,000, because that's a kind of a hefty budget when if we were going to hire a consultant to kind of help us in the first part to kind of lay out a plan. Is that, did you, Bridget, Councilor Brooks, excuse me, was that a number that we got from Hillsborough?
No, that's a number. When I talked with our city manager about what she thought. Now the low number of 10,000 that Lake Oswego, from what I understand, that Lake Oswego utilized, they also had staff and time to put their own staff and time to put towards the effort. And this was something that was just a rough number that Sherilyn thought that would be commensurate with the work and the effort that was needed, from what I understand. And like I said, I've looked at this as much as a line item because I think it's really important that we take care of this and that we stand by our decisions and lead in this way in a policy, but also if there's a way that we get help from the county or we get advice or help from other cities that could reduce our costs, it's not like, you know, we can't shift it. So that's it, especially since we haven't scoped it. That's why I thought of it more as like a placeholder. But I don't like the idea of coming at it and telling the public we're taking money from reserves for something that we actually have a plan that we had planned for.
Councilor Reyes.
Thank you. Councilor Brooks has, you know, I think it's great that she's thinking outside the box or ahead of the times, I would say. And I think it's a really valid point. I'm also someone that will support that. However, I think that I will have to have time a little bit to think about it and understand it a little bit more to consider it, since it is $100,000. So, and I understand we need to be ready and prepare and invest. But I really need time to think about it a little bit more.
Okay. Valerie.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. My question would be, if we wait for the next session and this to get implemented, what time frame would we be looking at to actually get the funding and start this? Because, you know, is this going to take another 2 years to get going? I just want a time frame for reference.
Time certain.
Thank you, Councilor Pratt. We would plan, like I mentioned, we would plan on coming forward this fall to scope it. And Dawn can speak to the process for taking it out of contingency, but it is a very simple process to pull it out of contingency. And I mean, that's where it resides right now. So in our fund balance or in our contingency, and I'm happy to have Dawn speak to that.
So yes, the process would be, it's a simple resolution at council. It's a resolution transfer, moving it from the contingency line into the, I would assume, the consultant line. So it's a simple resolution. We could scope it in a work session in one meeting and then come back the next meeting with the resolution to move the monies out of contingencies, which is where, as Sherilyn mentioned, that's where the money is sitting now. So whether we move it, if we moved it at the budget adoption, it would just be coming out of that same line item as it would come after you scope it.
Okay, I guess I wasn't clear on my question. I'm saying if we wait for Clackamas County or the state to provide funding to help with the climate action plan, how long, I know it's a rough estimate, but how long are we looking at to actually receive funds and be able to move forward with the climate action plan if we are relying or hoping to get those funds to help with this?
I don't know the answer to that question fully. I don't believe we would get funds from Clackamas County. They are coordinating a climate action plan for the county that includes the cities. And so we would leverage probably their work. So we would probably need to take their work and add to it. So we would need a little bit more money. And I don't know what funds are available from the state. We'd have to explore that.
Yeah, I guess that would be my only concern, is that we've got this as a priority for this year. And I do think that climate issues are interrelated with the COVID. So that would be my only concern, that we're putting this off into future years, something we should be dealing with sooner than later.
All right. So what I'm hearing is I'm not hearing 4 votes for this. maybe it's something where Council Brooks comes back with this request, maybe in a future session as we get closer to September, and ask again once we maybe have a better idea of scoping in September, because we're going to still be in the same fiscal year, so we're just doing it a few months later than we are right now. This way, Councilor Brooks can talk to other city councilors and answer their questions, and we'll have a way better idea in September, October how things are looking in with the impact of COVID on the city and on the state. So we might have a better crystal ball at that point. Is that acceptable, Councilor Brooks?
Well, certainly, and also if it's a matter of being a placeholder of 100,000 or 75,000, or just something that's even symbolic that we have, that we're not having the perception that we're pulling money out of reserves to do what's on our agenda this year. If that's a barrier to anyone supporting it, that would be my proposal. I just think I just feel that it sends a message that's inaccurate about what we decided and how we're moving forward.
But if we're going to discuss it in September,
yeah,
where we're going to do, I mean, if we're going to bring up in a general work session or a city council meeting where we all discuss and have a scoping session that will show our commitment to it. Maybe we don't have the line item in the budget at that point out of contingency, but we're showing our commitment to look at this. And at that time, we might have a better idea where you go, you know what, we definitely want to move that over out of contingency and have it in the consulting budget at that time. I think to me, it'd be apparent to the public that it is important to us because it's in our work action plan for September to take a look at this, get an idea what the scope is, and at that time say, hey, you know what, let's move a certain amount of dollars from the contingency to a formal line item under consulting.
Well, certainly, and I mean that's I think the way that we had discussed it, and I'm certainly hopeful that that's how that would be as well. That's acceptable, of course, to me. And anyway, you heard my concern. My concern is that we have a plan and have something on our work session, and the budget that we are passing this month doesn't reflect what our plan is. So anyway, it seems, I don't know if anyone else agrees with me that it seems strange, but to me it seems strange.
Okay. Anything else, Councilor Brooks, or a comment?
No, I appreciate the conversation, and I appreciate the support for the climate action plan. I appreciate the consulting that Sherilyn did with me, as well as people's thoughts on it. And I hope that when we do come with it and the scope happens, that the people that said that they're interested in a climate action plan pass the money out of the contingency fund to actually do it.
Councilor Morrison.
Yeah, thank you. Pretty much everything has been said. I just want to restate one more time my sincere appreciation and thanks to Chief Steele and all the work that he does with his department. I think, I'm a big fan of the Tiger Tualatin School District. I'm a huge fan of our school resource officers. And I think that the relationship that the city has with the school resource officers and with the school district, more of a partnership than anything else. And you're seeing what's happening in the Portland School District. We don't have those issues here. And I'm so proud of what the city has done and the work that they do to make us a very inclusive city and a city that has a very strong relationship with everybody. And so thanks again, Chief Steele, and thanks to city staff, which also plays a big role and all that. And certainly the event the other day and what the city did was, I think, was outstanding, and it makes me proud to be a part of Tualatin. And for right now, that's all I'll have. I may come back if you're going. I'm understanding you're making some comments, Mayor, and certainly we'll follow up with anything if it's appropriate.
Okay. So Rob already went. You'll get your turn, Nancy. Council, go ahead. Councilor Reyes.
Pretty much what I agree with everyone. I think our the situations that are happening currently or in the last couple of weeks have been really hard for everyone. In addition to the pandemic and the whole thing that's happening in the world. So the last thing we needed was something like that. But I really do think of our police officers, and I hope and send my good vibes to them that they're out there and they continue to be great to our community. And what happened last week with the protesting here in Tualatin was great. I didn't have the chance, unfortunately, because of work, but I got great reviews, great feedback from people, and one that was a little bit, different, but we were able. I really appreciate Councilor Brooks, I believe, set up the meeting with this family, a mom and a daughter, and we met this afternoon, and it was a really positive meeting. I think questions were answered, a lot of things were clarified. So I was very pleased with Chief Steele taking his time to do this and actually listen and be able to bring some kind of comfort and also reassure that our police officers here are held in high esteem and regard. So I was really happy with that. And so that's all I gotta say. But thank you all for, thank you all for your time. I'm just impressed with our city. So thank you all.
All right. Council President Grimes.
Well, I apologize because my comment at this moment actually goes back to what Councilor Brooks was talking about with the climate action plan.
Oh.
I wasn't quite done on that one, I'm sorry. But I just wanted to reiterate my support for talking about this in September. And I do feel like I understand Councilor Brooks's concern about the money coming in September out of a contingency fund, because it could be perceived as sort of being a last minute project that we're throwing in that we didn't plan for, we didn't plan ahead for, which is not the case, because we did discuss it at the advance and we did commit to it at the advance. So I just want to say I am wholeheartedly in support of talking about it in September. And then also perhaps we can frame the conversation or wordsmith the conversation when we do appropriate the money to fund it, whatever we determine it needs to be funded in September, so that we acknowledge the fact that it is a priority and it is something that we plan for, and it's not something that's just getting pulled out of an emergency or contingency fund through lack of planning or foresight on our part, and that we do feel really strongly about it and that it is a big priority for the council. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you very much.
Anything else, Nancy?
Well, and on to discussion of the police department. I mean, Chief Steele and the department, they have my deepest respect And I think that they do an absolutely outstanding job. I think that their level of integrity is unmatched. And I think that the heart that they bring to their work every day is amazing. I know I would need to check his email to see how long, but almost immediately upon the news of Mr. Floyd's murder being brought to the public's attention, we received an email from Chief Steele about his horror and outrage and sadness about the event that had taken place and his commitment to his department and to the training of his officers. And he alluded to discussions that he'd had with officers and roundtable discussions about what had happened in the case of Mr. Floyd, and just how horrifying that is, and that it's important to have discussions about fairness and equity and sensitive minority communities and the way that the police carry themselves and the way that they interact with our community. But what meant so much to me was that was an immediate response from him. That wasn't when a couple days went by and the demonstration started to turn into protests, started to turn into the top of mind across the world. This was something that was so important to him that he reached out to us almost immediately. And I just think that that shows the level of integrity and the commitment that they have to this community. And it makes me feel proud, and it also makes me feel very confident and very safe knowing that we have, that level of care out there. And then when we had that successful demonstration the other day, and then the additional demonstration that was out on Borland Road this weekend, I think it really showed the level of discourse that we have in our community and the care that the police officers take to, encourage free expression, but to do it within a way that's respectful of the whole community. So that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
I saw Councilor Reyes hang up real quick.
Oh, I was just gonna circle back to what Councilor Brooks, that I do support too. I'm a huge advocate for the climate action plan, and but I was kind of haven't had a time to really digest the whole your proposal. I know, seriously, I honestly have to say that. So that's why I support it in whenever we talk about it again. And just wanted to let you know that I am in favor of something like that, because we did talk about it at our events, and I just have not had a chance to actually digest the whole thing yet. And so as soon as I think in September, like Mayor Frank said, we will have a completely different view, hopefully, of the world. We'll be in a, I would say, for lack of a better word, in a better situation in September. So my mind will probably be more of that. So, but thank you for bringing it up and being always, rooting for the climate and for our environment. So thank you.
All right, I think I got everyone. All right, down to me. It's been said over and over tonight already. Want to thank Sherilyn, our operations staff, and the police department for the demonstration, putting together a plan, making sure the marchers were able to march on their route safely on June 2nd. I was in contact with Sherilyn, seems like a lot that morning. And Chief Steele I was talking to Chief Steele. I had some very nervous and irate residents calling me and emailing me. One very nervous about looting and criminal activity that was seen in Portland. And two, just wondering why the city would allow this to occur in the Commons. I assured folks that our police department was on this, that Chief Steele had a plan. He was working in conjunction with the organizers, and that it was not going to turn out like Portland. And in the event that we did have some bad actors, that the police department was ready and had a plan to react. And we never had to implement that plan. That's what the best part was about the evening, that afternoon, is that we didn't have to implement that. And as I was marching, what I was impressed by was the amount of folks who took a moment to stop and talk to our police officers and thank them for what they've been doing, their service. I had one of our motorcycle officers tell me he hasn't gotten, in those several days since Mr. Floyd's murder, he'd gotten more compliments on his professionalism than he has since he's been on the police force here in Tualatin. That our community recognizes the effort that our police put into this. Our community police effort. The city has always been a firm believer in community policing, where our officers are in the community, in our neighborhoods, interacting at, would be it National Night Out or our parks or our events. Our officers are very approachable. So yes, very impressed how it went. I was telling Sherilyn afterwards, I had flashbacks of the old crawfish parades, that there's a lot more people in this parade. They were in the crawfish, but how the police officers and the operations folks knew what to do, going intersection to intersection with the cones and rerouting, and also like the fact that the motorists who were impacted really didn't get ticked off. They were honking their horns, thumbs up, very patient with the, I said about 1,000. There was a lot of people. It wrapped around the commons. I don't know what the official count was, but it's somewhere between 1,000 and the pumpkin regatta as far as the amount of people there, because it was crowded. I'll move on to other things and then get to my last item. Pretty busy day these last 2 weeks. The 28th was a winner of May. I started off the morning there with the West Side Economic Alliance breakfast forum. It was a Zoom meeting. I had to wrap up everything we've done in a year in 3 minutes. But that went very well. Discussed what we were doing as a reaction to COVID, Tualatin 2040, and our Tualatin Moving Forward effort. Later that morning, we had the Metro Mayors Consortium meeting where we talked about the election results, legislative updates, and what's to come from the state with COVID-19. Right after that was Greater Portland Inc., where we talked, the governor's office gave a presentation on reopening Oregon, briefly discussed phases 1, 2, and 3, which keep changing. I don't know about you guys, but the requirements for each phase seems to morph every day, but we're trying to keep up with that. Also talk about CARES funding, trying to get that funding from the feds to the state to local municipalities. Near the end of the day, I had the chamber board meeting and finished the day with the Veterans Memorial Committee. It was their final meeting to review the report that we'll be giving on their choice of a site and some ideas they have on the Veterans Memorial. Was impressed by with the committee was a little level of dedication, enthusiasm, the pretty broad swath of experiences that were there, and how much people were dedicated to it. It was a fun committee to be on, hear all the different ideas, especially when we transitioned from in-person to Zoom meetings. People still participated, and they are very, they're looking forward to us getting this report, reviewing it, and questioning the results of it. On June 1st, we had the Washington County Chair Mayor's meeting, where Chair Harrington discussed the money that was being dispersed to the 4 business recovery centers, of which one of them is in Tualatin. Was at the chamber this morning with Ray Pitts from the Times and Jonathan, giving him a story of what's going to happen with the Business Resource Center and its purpose. And on the following meeting after that, the following Tuesday, got terrific news that the second part of the CARES funding that's being distributed from the county down to the cities and the agencies is that Family Promise of Tualatin Valley will now have 10 rooms that they're going to run for this side of the county at the Extended Stay Hotel in Tigard. Those 10 rooms will be for individuals and families, and they will act as case managers. So we finally have some housing for those folks in need on this side of the county that is accessible between now and December, because it's part of that CARES money. And Rose Money, a Family Promise, was very excited to get that news, and very thankful for the Washington County mayors for pushing that across the finish line with the county commissioners.
Can I just jump in there and say that for those of you that don't know and haven't followed this, that is a direct result of Mayor Bubenick's advocacy on behalf of that program. That was going down. There wasn't support at the county level for that, and Mayor Bubenick has pushed that and pushed that and pushed that. And so I just want to say thank you for your leadership on that, Mayor Bubenick.
Thank you. Mayor Steiner was involved too. Then we had Clackamas County Chair Mayor's meeting. Subject of that discussion was Clackamas County not being ready to go to phase 2 yet. They weren't meeting to their requirements, so they're hoping to meet those 2 requirements in the coming weeks. So they were not part of that bunch of counties that recently applied. And then finally, on the 5th of June, I was on the League of Oregon Cities call along with Paul, discussing phase 2 and phase 1. And Paul asked a question about baseball. I asked a question about funding for those cities that are in 2 counties. And our particular incidence was since Tualatin is in Clackamas County, and Clackamas County is going to get money as part of this CARES funding from the state. Do we get a little sliver of that money since we're in Clackamas County? And they had no idea. Still working out the details. Still working on the details on how baseball is going to work out, hopefully here this summer. I mentioned to Sherilyn, it seems like phase 2 requirements and phase 2 guidance kind of changes week to week. And so I can see why businesses are a little frustrated, but it seems like basically every day you have to go to the COVID-19 reaction site for the state to find out what's the news and see what's required. So, but I was very happy to see a lot of the bars, restaurants, nail salons, hair cutting reopened in Tualatin, and looks like people are doing very decent business, and they're doing their best to comply with the state's requirements for phase 1. And then finally tonight, I mentioned in an email, and you've seen them, as a result of Mr. Floyd's murder, the Obama Foundation has put out a mayor's pledge request. And what they're asking is the city's mayors to take the pledge to do 4 items in their community. And the crux of that is to review police use of force policies in your city. And what that involves is engaging your community, and they want a wide variety of input, experiences, and stories in that review of your police use of force policies. In my mind, that's a perfect way to bring in our city committees, our diversity task force, and aging task force, in addition to residents. The third thing that you have to do is report your findings to the community and ask for feedback on that review of your police use of force policies. And finally, based on that feedback, you reform your community police use of force policies. I've talked to Sherilyn about this, and I've talked to Chief Steele, and I believe Chief Steele has some comments.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, I've been sitting here comments, and I got to say, I really appreciate the comments that were made earlier by Mr. Mitten. The last couple of weeks have been tough for the police department in a lot of different ways, but we truly appreciate the conversations that have been had. I've had conversations with people that I've never talked to in our community before, and they've been asking just wonderful questions, questions that really needed to be asked about how their police department operates, and they deserve to know that information. There's no doubt about it. The change needs to occur in our country. Racism needs to stop. excessive use of force by police. It needs to stop. And now is an opportunity to make that happen. The incidents that Mr. Minton mentioned about Westland and Minneapolis and so many other things that have gone on in our country, they make me sick, and I know they make our department members sick. And we want to do better than that as a profession. We welcome the thoughtful changes that need to take place. We want to be open and transparent. We want to get information out about how our department operates. Just today, just as to help as a starting point, we added our entire policy manual to our website so people have access to that information. And if they're curious, they can just get on there and start looking at it. Because honestly, we're community servants. We're here to serve the community, and we have to meet the expectations that our community has. As police officers, we have honestly a lot of authority that comes along with the position, but with that authority comes a lot of responsibility, and we can't ever take that for granted, because that responsibility and authority is basically built on the trust our community has in us. So it's up to us to make sure we're meeting that need. So we're here for the community. We want to make things better. We want to be involved in that process, and we enjoy and look forward, like I said, honestly, to having people provide input to make sure we're providing the service that they want in our community. And, I got to say, I'm glad my camera's off, because I get a little bit emotional hearing the positive comments about, my name included, but it's our staff that are literally making tens of thousands of contacts with our community members every year. And, I sit in an office and I get to, get them what they need and keep them pointed in the right direction, but they're the ones that are doing the hard work every single day. So I'm very proud of our staff, and I'm glad that you feel the same way about our department as well. So thank you for that. And we look forward for the weeks and months to come and having engaged conversations with our community members. So that's not my time. I'm brief. I'm done. Thank you very much.
Right. Well, circling back is Mayor Snyder has made the commitment, made the pledge on behalf of Tigard. And I didn't want to do it just by myself. I wanted to discuss this with council, because I know how we feel about our police department. I know we're all very proud of our department. So I wanted this to be, a council decision before I went and clicked a few buttons and said, yeah, and committed our city to it. I also wanted to confirm with Sherlyn that we had the bandwidth to do this outreach to the community and get it done within the next 90 days or so, because that's what they're looking for from the Obama Foundation. So I'm just throwing out there for discussion. Hopefully we're all in support of this. And questions, comments? Sherlyn?
Well, I just make one comment about, yes, we did have a conversation about bandwidth, but I'll say, just to riff off of what the chief said, that this is important, and we will make bandwidth, and we welcome this opportunity. And I am so proud of our organization and our department and our chief. But we want to be transparent and open, and we want to, we welcome the community input. And so we will make that time, and we will make that bandwidth.
Counselor. Comments? Thumbs up? Yes? No?
Can I say something?
Sure.
Well, I wanted to also thank Mr. Minton for your comments earlier on top of the meeting, and thank Chief Steele for all of his work, and the meeting today that Chief Steele and Councilor Reyes and I had with community members, people who are checking their own privilege, wanting to make sure that they're doing right and advocating the most and the best they can for people that may be the most marginalized or deal with the most injustice in our communities and our system. And I just want to say, it's so hard, and I want to be really thoughtful about how I put it, but it's so hard for people to discern differences between departments, especially when the overarching issues are systemic racial injustice, systemic racism. And so to have the opportunity to highlight what it is that we're doing well and to be an example where we can be, and to strengthen our organization and transparency where we can still grow. I like to look at things on a continuum and think that we're always evolving and changing as we grow and learn more about ourselves and each other. And I'm really, really proud of your leadership, Mayor Bubenik, for considering it. I watched that report, as I said earlier, from President Obama and the whole committee that they had for introducing that idea. And I also want to say, when I went to DC, one of the things that I enjoyed the most was the Black Caucus there, and requested to join the Black Caucus on behalf of our city, just to, and that was before all this happened, but I just believe that if we start with the most vulnerable, we start with the most, looking at issues that people face, that everyone, that reduction in whatever it is, whether it's brutality, in all different forms, not just police, but through societal, economic, we're going to deal with more with hunger, with different things because of economic downturns. So being mindful of this, I just want to say I'm very supportive of it, and I appreciate your leadership and the leadership of the city. Thanks.
Thanks. Other comments? Pretty quiet. So okay for, basically I'll ask Sherilyn to coordinate with staff and come up with a plan on meeting the 4 requirements of President Obama's mayoral pledge. And then tomorrow I'll click the buttons on the website and commit Tualatin to it. Do I have head nods from everybody that's okay to proceed? I see, okay. You need anything else, Sherilyn, for that?
I don't think so. We'll report back.
Right. I saw a thumbs up from Scott too. Good. All right. So that wraps up my communications. It's, I think, as a lot of the counselors said before, it's been these last 2 weeks been pretty busy between COVID-19, the reopening, and the incidents of, police use of force done the wrong way, and then what's happening in Portland, what's happened in Salem, and thankfully in our community it did not happen because I think we're a little bit closer community, and our police department it has a lot more. The community respects our police department way more than in other areas of the country. I think, as Council Brooks said, and that's through a lot of work on their part to make our community feel safe. So with that, do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion second to adjourn our meeting this evening. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you all for attending tonight. Thanks, Scott, for your comments.
Thank you, Mayor.
Good night.